how lucky are we to kick off Saturday with one of the best opening season games we could ask for? The Texas Longhorns, quarterbacked by Arch Manning, in his first game as the team's full-time starter, traveling up to Columbus, where they'll face the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, throughout this preseason and fall camp, we've spent more than enough time talking about the rosters, the strengths, weaknesses that both carry. The one thing that we haven't touched on with both of these teams is how little production they are returning from a season prior. Ohio State is 101st in the nation, and Texas is down at 103rd. So many new pieces, two very brand new teams, but also two of the few programs across the nation where that doesn't really matter as much. There are stars across the board. There are stars across the board that you do not know yet. They've just had to kind of wait their turn to introduce themselves to you all, and they will do so this upcoming weekend. So with all these game previews, where do we start first? What do I know about both of these teams? For Texas, I know, ball knower here knows, that the offense is going to perform at a higher level than it did last season. And you may say, oh, that's crazy, Blake. They were really good last season. They lost a lot of guys. There's so much unknown. How can you say that? But what we're failing to recognize is that they have a lot of stuff that they didn't have last year. CJ Baxter, hurt last preseason, is a force at the running back position, and the tandem with him and Contrevion Wisner will be one of the best in this sport. And despite losing two wide receivers to the NFL, this group will have more pop than it did in 2024. Matthew Golden came along late into the 2024 college football season. He was not a household name through the first 6 to 7 weeks. And Isaiah Bond, for all things considered, was a disappointment in 2024. Now the duo is Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore, and I do believe they'll have a bigger impact on this offense than Bond and Golden did, especially at the start of the season. And then we also know that the offense is getting an upgrade at the quarterback position. Sure, same as I said before, you might be saying, oh, how can you say that? He hasn't played yet. We don't know what it's going to look like, and fine. I'll give you, maybe he's not as good of a thrower as Quinn Ewers was, but he is not a statue at the quarterback position, something that hampered this offense all last year, especially with their shaky offensive line, and that's something that's going to make things a little bit easier to start off this season if the line isn't great in weeks 1 through 4. Arch, at the very least, is a fantastic athlete, runner. I think he's going to open up more in this offense. So give me that at least. And then I also reserve the right to believe that I think Arch is also a better quarterback, passer, thrower than Ewers was. But I guess if you want, we can wait a little bit longer before I take my victory lap. So that's what I know I'm getting out of the Texas Longhorns heading into this upcoming season. Now, for Ohio State, I know that they have two of the, top 4 or 5 players in the sport. Jeremiah Smith, best offensive player in the game. Him and the rest of these wideouts will be a really tough test for Texas's good, but somewhat new secondary. I think they've got at least 2 starters between safety and corner. Good players, as I mentioned, but again, new pieces figuring things out on the back end of that defense, and a really tough matchup with Ohio State. I am very interested to see how the new Ohio State Buckeyes offensive coordinator Brian Hartline, who's also the longtime wide receivers coach, responsible for all these studs we've come to know from OSU, dials things up. What is that offense going to look like out the gate? It's a new season with a new young quarterback, but Ohio State was at its best last year when they were pushing the ball down the field and playing into the team's best strengths, which were its wideouts. Does he allow his new quarterback, Julian Sain, to do that out the gate? We'll have to find out. I also know that this is one of those programs where you should never doubt the new waves of talent that come through. And if there's one room in particular where they just rinse and repeat talent better than anyone else, it's at the edge position. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, the two guys that are next, I guess. Last year it was Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. Years before it was the Bosa brothers. They always just have these waves of great edge rushers coming through. I think both of those guys will have an advantage over Texas's tackles. And I do think that they'll need to be difference makers in their first career starts if they're going to halt that Longhorn offense. Now, what do I think I know from Ohio State? I think I know that it's going to take a little bit of time for the plane to get off the tarmac, especially on defense. A new defensive coordinator, all but 3 new starters on the defense. And again, that's not to say they're bad. People get upset when I say that. It's not that I think these guys aren't talented. I just told you that I think they are. but it's just not going to be great at this point of the season. Talk to me in week 10 when I think they're humming and everything has gotten figured out between the coordinators and the players. I'll buy into it then. I just don't think it's going to be that way week 1 against a really talented Texas offense. And I also think I know that this running game, much like the defense, needs to prove itself before I can buy into it. You not only have to replace Trevion Henderson, you have to replace Quinshon Judkins, but Chip Kelly is now back in the NFL, and you lose what was the best run game designer in the sport. So that's a lot to change on offense. And for a young quarterback, I don't care how great the receivers are, you need to be two-dimensional. You can't just be focused on the passing game. And now for Texas, what I think I know is that there's reason to be worried about the interior parts of both sides of the trenches. We've talked about the offensive line a lot, so I don't need much more to say besides they better hope that OSU's running game, that OSU's defensive front isn't getting to Arch on a consistent basis. But defensive tackle is the greater concern here. And it's not in a way that I think they're just going to get wiped off the board and Ohio State's going to be facing second and third or third and short. But I just wonder if Ohio State is able to do that, run the ball consistently between the tackles, that it means the best parts of this defense can't play into their strengths. We love the linebacking duo. We love the edge rushers. If it's third and short and Ohio State can just run 5-6 yards at a clip, I don't love that you're kind of minimizing the impact that best players on this Texas defense start. So the focal point of this is obviously to make Julian Sayin uncomfortable. But if he doesn't need to do all that much, it might be hard to get them off the field or change momentum with a big sack or a big turnover in this game. So that's what I think I know, what I know from both teams. We're now going to kick it over to the Spring Break College Football Stat Department, which, if you are watching on YouTube, is a really dumb bit I'm just going to throw out during these game previews. Stat Department says, for Ohio State, Texas. And first of all, stats are just great when they back up what I believe in them. And that being said, I love the stat I have in this game. The Texas Longhorns are 6-0 straight up and 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 openers, while Ohio State is 0-3-1 against the spread in their last 4 season openers. So thank you to the Spring Break College Football Stat Department. Get the nerds out of the sports. Is it the stats department, analytics department? We'll find out. We'll toy around with it as the season goes on. So what this game boils down to for me is I think that this game was played last season. And I am not talking about the semifinals match between these two teams in the college football playoffs. Last year, in week 2, Steve Sarkisian led his team into Ann Arbor to take on the then defending national champion Michigan Wolverine. A team littered with defensive talent yet again, but a new defensive coordinator, and Sark put them in a blender. 31 points, 400 yards of total offense. I believe that Steve Sarkisian versus Matt Patricia is the greatest mismatch in this game. And even if Ohio State is putting points up on their own, I think Sark and Arch will make an emphatic introduction to the world this Saturday and win by a final score of 35-23. Now, for our betting perspectives, we are going to buy a half point for this game, get the Longhorns down to a nice juicy +3, and we're going to throw that in as one of my best bets for the week. And I also love the Texas team total of over 23.5. Still got to feel out the rest of the board. I may double down on this game and make them, 2 of my best 5 bets for the week. But for now, we're just going to take Texas. I like getting them down to +3. I think that this is one of those games that we've already seen kind of play out. When you have Sark and you have a talented offensive system heading into a team that is really good but still figuring things out and also doesn't have a lot of time to figure things out, that's when Sark is at his best. I think he's going to expose the OSU defense. Maybe it's specifically in the front 7, but either way, I think Texas is going to put up a lot of points. I think OSU will be able to respond here and there. Again, 35-23, it sounds like a big blowout, but I think that's a good showing for the Buckeyes in week 1 with all the new pieces they have. So Texas wins that game, and I cannot wait to watch this one unfold.